Alrighty, another AMA. So today we got Pete in the hot seat, and we're going to tackle a buyer's agent Ask Me Anything. I know the buyer's agency space is developing a fair bit at the moment. Some people know what they do. Some people don't even know what the fuck a buyer's agent is or the fact they even exist. So let's jump straight into it. Pete, what is a buyer's agent? What do they do?
So one thing it's not is the opposite to a selling agent. So there's this term going around at the moment because buyer's agents are fairly new.
Hmm.
And a way to quickly explain what they do is they'll say, oh, we're the opposite to a selling agent. We support the buyer, not the seller. While that is technically the case, the roles are just completely different. So from a buyer's agent point of view, we're obviously there to protect the buyer, support the buyer through the entire process. It really depends if it's an investor or a home buyer. Processes are a little bit different. But at the very beginning, once you engage a buyer's agent, it's their responsibility to understand exactly what you want to get out of the purchase. If you're a home buyer, where do you want to live? What's your budget? Access to amenities? Where are the suburbs that you're looking? What's your history been around making offers? And where can we really add the value in the process?
Hmm.
If it's an investment purchase, it's understanding what their budget is, but what's their long-term strategy around their investing goals and what do they want property to do for them? So is it early retirement or is it buying back time? So you have more access to future funds through the rent and then you can actually go off and do whatever you want. So they're all very different strategies that come with it, but at the beginning, a good buyer's agent should really understand exactly what their buyer wants to do with the purchase. Once you've done all that and you get a clear understanding around what the strategy is, it's the buyer's agent's responsibility to then, I guess, go out and source the property. So it's not just scrolling realestate.com. And that's a common thing that people think that buyer's agents do. And look, some do. They will just scroll realestate.com and then they'll just send it off to their buyers and say, hey, does this suit? And that's obviously not the way I operate and not the way good buyer's agents operate. So yes, we will look at on markets, but because we've got really good relationships with real estate agents, we also get access to off-market and pre-market listings as well. An off-market listing could be, it is something that is not going to hit the market. So it's not going to hit your realestate.coms or your domains. It's just going to be accessed via the agent relationship and you can do a deal in private. You got your pre-markets as well, which are basically at the stage of getting photos done. But if you've got that really good relationship with an agent, you can get in there before the photos are getting taken or during the photo process. And I guess have early access to show it to your client, get them geared up and obviously try to make an offer and secure it before it hits the market. But even if it hits the market, we all know properties are selling very, very quickly. So there's not going to be any fucking around on the property. You know it's coming to market. You've looked at it. You've walked through. You've assessed it. You know what it's worth and you're ready to make an offer from day one. That's the sourcing side of stuff. The next step would be to inspect the properties, which it really depends again who you're working with. If you've got a home buyer, you'll take them through the property. So you'll highlight what you think is good, what's bad about the property, and really step them through the process because a lot of home buyers, particularly first home buyers, don't know what they're looking for. So they get excited and they miss the real basic things like cracks in the walls, or maybe there's some water damage in the ceiling, or it's painted over. Just things that are cosmetic, but could actually be quite detrimental in the long term. They're so obvious to an experienced buyer, but when you're a first home buyer, a lot of emotions involved and you miss it. And how much can you actually look at within 5 minutes? I mean, most inspections will only take 5 to 10 minutes. And you're then expected to make a $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 purchasing decision, probably the most important and the most expensive purchasing decision of buyers' lives in that 10-minute time frame.
And
So it's ridiculous, right?
Yeah, when you break it down like that, it's really hard, especially if you've never bought before. So if it's a home buyer, we step them through, we take them through again a second time as well. And we do really detailed video inspections too. So highlighting all the issues that we've seen and let them sit on that for the next couple of days and think about whether or not they do want to proceed with an offer or go to auction. If it's an investor, and very similar process if we're buying here, but if we're buying interstate, that's a bit of a different process, which I'll talk through another day. In terms of the negotiation phase, so we've built the brief, we've got a good understanding of exactly what they're looking for, we've gone out and sourced the property, we've inspected the property. Now we've come to the stage of, right, we want to make an offer. It really depends on the process of which the agent is selling the property. If it's a private treaty, we will go away and work out exactly what the property is worth based on a number of different comparables that have sold. So not the price guide that the agent is quoting, comparable properties that have sold.
Pete, I want to stop you there for a second. Private treaty, can you just give us a download of what that actually is?
So that's basically when the property gets listed. It could be with or without a price guide, and it's normally open for maybe 2 to 3 weeks. It could be only open for one weekend if it sells quickly, but I guess it's behind closed doors in a way. So you submit your offer, and your beginner buyers will just submit their offer and hope for the best. With a buyer's agent, it's a bit more detailed than that, but that's basically the gist of it.
Okay, sure. So it's sort of the opposite of an auction?
Yeah, that's it. Because auction, you're on the auction floor, so to speak, and you're bidding with other people, with other buyers, and it's pretty transparent in that process too. You know exactly where people stand in that process, and yeah, you go back and forth until you have the highest bidder.
And I'd imagine in your day-to-day, the negotiation piece is where you add a lot of value to your clients, right? That's really where you would make a lot of your money, quote unquote, for the client.
100%, and especially when there's price guides involved too, because it happened over the weekend. There was a price guide of 750 to 800. Clients loved it. I said, fucking no way, because it was underquoted and it sold for 970. Now, we could have wasted our time doing the due diligence on that property, getting the building and pest inspection, which is $700, getting everybody so emotionally invested in the process just to fail within the first 2 minutes of the auction, because our budget for that brief is only $850. It's not falling into the trap of overpaying and believing price guides are what they are, because some agents with an off-market scenario will offer it to buyers as well. Now may come through their open home and they'll say, hey, I've actually got this off-market that might suit. Agents are starting to realize how good of a marketing strategy that is and overquote the property to suck in the first-time buyers and investors to pay a higher price because they think it's good because it's an off-market.
As much as that's highly illegal, but yes, it is definitely happening. I was just thinking before, like with the auction P, that's almost where, particularly if it's a home buying purchase and people are emotional, that's what the auctions are geared towards. Like we're relying on people getting emotional, getting wrapped up in the drama of an auction on the day and not wanting to miss out on a property for $1,000, for example, which I have one landlord who did, and she's still kicking herself to this day, but she also went there on her own. If she had invested in your services, for example, she would have had, I assume, a strategy around how we're going to bid, what this is going to look like, and in using your experience, because she was clueless. She's like, I had no idea what I was doing. Do you think too that your fee would generally save people money because you're not getting wrapped up in the drama of the emotion of the day, but also, like you said, you know where it's going to go. So you're not wasting time and even showing up and getting wrapped up into what if those buyers had gone there with their $850 and overcommitted to $970. The value in having someone like you for an auction situation seems really obvious to me.
Yeah, and I actually think they probably would have overcommitted in this instance. Like we didn't see it worth more than 900 or 910, but it got really competitive between a couple of buyers. And Empty could probably talk to this more, but the risks around getting a bank vow done and paying way too much at auction and then failing the finance side of stuff, it can get a little bit dangerous. But yeah, we certainly are there to maximize the outcome for clients. So just to take you through a process that we did recently, we sit down with the clients before the auction and we go through everything we think about, the like comparables and really trying to work out what the value is. And we have two prices in mind. So the price is what we all think it's worth, but then there's also the stretch price too, because if it's a home buyer purchase, you may need to stretch a little bit, but it's also not stretching too far that you're going to put yourself at risk in the future, particularly if you're paying for what it's not worth. But the strategy around that too, like quick bidding is something that I like to do, is really getting a bit of an understanding around who's actually bidding, and really, really quick and somewhat aggressive bids is what
Mhm.
I like to do. And it really takes control of the auction. Now, that only works if you've got a reasonable budget and you've priced it right and you know that you're in with a really, really good chance. Quick bidding with not a sufficient budget is just one path to embarrassment, really. I've seen it happen where they'll do a couple of quick bids at the beginning and then it will sell 100 grand above what their last bid was. So quick bidding is really good if you've got sufficient budget, and you can definitely get it cheaper than what would have happened if you just allowed the bidding to take its own pace and let the auctioneer really run the show, so to speak. So you got to try and take some of that power back. And looking at people as well directly when you're bidding, as much as that sounds intimidating, if you look the part and you look like you know what you're doing and you're being quite aggressive with your bidding, it is quite confronting and people do give up. I've seen it happen, and it happened not long ago. We paid 1.523 for it, I think, something around that mark. And our maximum budget was 1.54. So we were getting very, very close to the end, and they just gave up. I could see it in their face where they just were like, yeah, nah, we're just going to give up, because the quick bids were happening
Yeah,
and
there's a
mixing up
whole
your bidding.
art to it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and so
definitely.
taking down from the timing of when you do your quick bidding, right? There's so much that goes into it that if you haven't done this plenty of times, you're set for failure, right?
Yeah, that's it. And the confidence as well is huge. If you can appear confident, then it's a massive game changer.
You know what I've seen though, and you said it, with the cringe factor of those who quick bid at the start and then it goes 100 over, there's a fake confidence too. People who try and do what you're saying and they try and be an aggressive and, yeah, we've got this. That's really obvious to those who have the experience in reading that I think it's everyone else who's not experienced might not pick up on that. But if you're in the crowd, I would hate to be trying to bid against you.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like, Pete, you're all over it. Honestly, I reckon we could tackle negotiation in a whole separate episode, but keep stepping us through that process, Pete. After negotiation, what else is involved in terms of a buyer's agent's value proposal to a client?
So once we've negotiated and I guess we've secured the property in terms of, yep, they've agreed to our offer, we then go and organise everything else that comes after that. So we've got the
Mhm.
building and pest inspectors lined up to get that done within calling off if it's private treaty. So calling off, that's basically a buyer's right to withdraw from the contract at no penalty. Now, depending on which state you reside in and you're buying in, there might be a small fee attached to that, like 0.2% of the purchase price, but you can pretty much just withdraw by sending an email to the agent. That's when we schedule in the building and pest inspection, because then that gives us a bit of power back to potentially negotiate some price reductions, which real estate agents absolutely hate. But if you get things back like structural issues, you're already in a good position of power because you've had your offer accepted. You've got nothing to lose by trying to renegotiate the price with the option to withdraw your offer within the calling off period. And that's why that process needs to happen within the calling off period. The sellers, the agents, they know that you can withdraw. And if the way you pitch it, they will think you're going to withdraw. And it depends on what the issue is, obviously. But that's when you can get a little bit of saving as well on the purchase price and, I guess, renegotiate.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the biggest value adds that gets missed is that negotiation piece. There's the negotiation piece at the very start when, you've engaged with the sales agent at step one and the property's gone to market. But something that really gets lost, especially with first home buyer and first time investor clients, the real value out of that additional negotiation based on the outcome of pest and building. I know personally with clients who have engaged BAs, they've saved an extra 10 grand on the purchase price just based on the outcome of the pest and building inspection. And it's something that a lot of people don't know that they can do. And even if they know that they can do it, they also have that fear that they might lose the sale altogether. And so they hesitate from doing it at all.
Yeah, people don't realize as the buyer, you're the only one that can technically pull out of the contract. Even if you put it to the seller, they can say no and it's fine. Just proceed if you want to. But if you don't want to, you can pull the contract. But it's not always saving money. It could just be getting them to fix something as well. We've had, for example, in SA, termites are quite a common thing. We don't want termites inside the house, but there may be evidence of termites along the fence line or right at the back of the property. What we try and negotiate there is a termite barrier treatment. The seller will actually cover all those costs, and before settlement, all that would have been sorted so the buyer doesn't have to pay for that, which in itself could be a couple of $1,000s of savings.
So overall, Pete, what I'm hearing is what you actually do is a lot more than just sitting on realestate.com and just sending a 2-sentence email to the agent and agreeing to a purchase price.
Yeah, there is a lot more that goes on. It's really project managing the purchase, basically, and people management.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put it. It's literally project managing someone's investment property purchase or purchase of their new home.
Yeah, you're pretty much getting an understanding of exactly what they want and then coming up with a strategy and then executing on the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you're only able to do that because you're not emotionally attached to the purchase, and therefore you can get more information and act more decisively.
So, Pete, something I'm really curious about is how do you know if a property is undervalued or it's just shit?
When you say undervalued, that's the term that people are talking about below market value. So they might say, I bought a property 30 grand below market value.
Mhm.
Value is what you pay on the day. So if you've paid 30 grand lower than a comparable, in quotations for people who can't see, then that's the value of the property. Because what a lot of people do is they'll look at a property and they'll say, this 3-bed, 2-bath home, it could even be next door, sold for $550,000, and I'm securing my home next door, 3-bed, 2-bath for what, 520. So 30 grand below market value is what they would argue. But at the end of the day, both of those properties are very different. One might have one less living, one might have smaller bedrooms. One you might be able to add a lot more value to, like the one that sold for 550, there might be something within that property where you can just be like, yeah, there's a lot more value there. Maybe it's got an outdoor entertaining area.
Mhm.
So when you're trying to find properties that are undervalued, make sure you're comparing properties which are comparable. So just because they're next door or down the street doesn't make them comparable. In order to find something which is undervalued, you got to understand why the seller is actually selling. They may want the quicker settlement term, or they may want a rent back, or maybe they want a longer settlement term. We've done a few of those deals lately where they've done a 90-day settlement because they're not in a rush to get out. They need to find their own property. Or maybe it's they have a rent back option because they then have to find their own property, but they don't have the borrowing capacity or they don't want to do bridging finance or something like that. So you actually have an opportunity to offer probably a little bit less than what you deem is fair and comparable, taking into account a property which is pretty much an equivalent to the one that you're looking to buy. So I believe the only way to get properties undervalued is to understand why the sellers are selling and try and capitalize on that. Not just sitting there and saying a 3-bed, 2-bath home next door sold for 550 and we purchase a 3-bed, 2-bath next door for 520. That to me is not undervalued.
Yeah,
because they're very different properties.
So it's about getting the buy right. Why is the other person selling? And how do we capitalize on that to get a good deal?
Also zoning as well. As much as real estate agents will say they know everything and they like to believe they do, another good example is where real estate agents will miss the zoning regs. You might have a property which is a couple of streets away, sell for 550. You could pick up an equivalent property for 550 down the road, but the zoning is very different. So to me, that is heavily undervalued because you can actually look at building 2 or 3 townhouses on that particular property that you've paid 550 for, and you compare it to the other property that sold for 550 where the zoning is completely different and you can't even subdivide it, or maybe you could sub it into one property or something like that. But significant difference in terms of the value add between the 2 properties, even though on the face of it all, they look exactly the same.
Yeah, definitely. I think the zoning one is huge. I've seen quite a few clients recently who they've been able to go one lot and split it into 2 because they've picked up something that's older and has zoning configurations that will just let them go 1 into 2 or 1 into 3. and then not even need to develop, but even just sell off the vacant lots. And they end up making 150, 200 grand just because they got the zoning aspect of it right.
Yeah, and we've actually purchased, an example is, I think we paid 20 grand more than a comparable a couple of streets away because it had the zoning, and we had to just get our client across all of that because the uplift in that opportunity is a hell of a lot more than the 20 grand extra that we paid.
Exactly right. Let's say you spend 20 grand over today, but then in 10 years' time, when they look to develop it, they can actually split it into 2 lots. That 20 grand potentially turns into a $500,000 windfall just by overpaying a little bit today.
Exactly. It's just taking, and I wouldn't even say it's overpaying. It's actually still undervalued, right? Because to me, that property, you could probably sell. If you were to put development opportunity, you know how some agents will do that, or a lot of good agents will, in the listing description, really stick it out. It's in front of your face. You see it the first thing when you read the listing, then it's going to sell for a lot more. Because even beginner investors and even first home buyers, they'll think that everyone wants land, right? And everyone wants to be able to say, oh yeah, I bought a plus 600 square meter block, but it could be subdivided into 3. There's this thing in Australia where people love to be able to say that. So I think just that ability to say that, home buyers are interested too. So you're going to get a natural increase anyway, just by stating that in the listing.
Probably a really good point then to move to, what are you saying? Obviously, that client that you're talking about was very switched on and was making the right decisions. What are you seeing smart investors do that, let's say, rookie investors, first-time investors, or cheap investors aren't doing?
So the smart investors are not buying at the peak of the market. So there's a number of markets around Australia which, and even within Adelaide, have significantly increased over the last couple of years. They're in the media, everyone's talking about them, but the time's gone. The opportunity to buy in those markets has gone. So I always say to clients, once a market has hit the media repetitively, it's all you hear about, you're often way too late. So yeah, beginner investors do kind of fall into that trap, and they'll be buying properties which have already had an uplift of, I don't know, 60% over the last 3 years. How much further can those properties go? Now, some can, because you have to look at the metrics and all that behind it, but investors will just, it's FOMO. It is.
They made 100 grand in 3 months. I'm going to go buy there. Too late.
It is very, very risky, particularly in a couple of the regional areas at the moment, but even in parts of Adelaide too, where the affordability is just beyond repair at the moment for some areas. But yeah, that's another story for another day. Buying at the peak is probably the big thing. And yeah, the big takeaway is once you see markets hit the media multiple times, particularly if it's a good 12 months where you've repetitively seen, like Perth and Adelaide as an example, they've been in the media a lot, particularly Perth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. And people are getting in now, and I don't understand why. And I guess overpaying as well, but that kind of comes with the nature of getting into a market late. You do run the risk of overpaying because all markets do hit a peak and they do come back a little bit. Some will nosedive, most will come back a bit. And some people are okay with that because they're like, oh, well, at least it's not going to plummet, but it's the opportunity costs that you're missing out on too. You might get a quick 10% uplift in 12 months, but then you might not get anything for 3 more years. But if you got into a market that I guess has just started its cycle, you're going to get that 40, 50% over the next 3-4 years uplift. And then that opportunity cost that you've missed out on because in 3 or 4 years' time, you're ready to buy something again.
Yeah, I think that's a really big one, especially when I look at it from the lending side of things. It's recycling the equity that they've put into that property. That's one of the biggest priorities for property investors, is being able to pyramid. So being able to purchase a property, have the value of that property increase fairly quickly, and then pull that equity back out and roll it into another purchase. And sometimes people will be so addicted to that idea of, oh, I want to get my deposit out ASAP, that they buy somewhere that might have quick uplift for 6 months and then do nothing for another 3-4 years. And they'd actually just be better off buying one property, being really patient and sitting on it for 5 years instead of 2 subpar assets.
Yeah, I always say to clients, it's best to really try and get in at the beginning. And even if it's It depends on the brief, but if it's halfway through the cycle and you want to build quickly, it can work. But yeah, long-term investing is the way to go, and not trying to pick hot spots while they're super, super hot.
So, Pete, you're really passionate about what you do. Like, it shines through in the way that you talk about things. What got you into the buyer's agent space? What's the origin story?
So the origin story is probably the reason why I started investing to
Mhm.
begin with. I went and did my 2 degrees at uni and thought I was doing the right thing, and quickly realized it was fucking the wrong thing to do. But I started my full-time work in accounting and law and different jobs anyway. So I built my portfolio because I wanted a way out in a way, or not a way out. I just wanted to have options later on, because a lot of people will say, well, if you retire, what are you going to do? It's not about that. To me, property is about having opportunities. And if you invest right, you invest well, you invest for the long term, then you're going to buy yourself opportunities in the future. And it's not about just retiring and doing nothing. It's about being able to quit your job, starting a business, what I've been able to do, which has been awesome. But even then, it could just be working part-time hours too.
Mhm.
So I really started to understand that my 9 to 5 job wasn't going to get me what I wanted. It wasn't going to allow me to live the life that I wanted. And I didn't want to be tied down to that. So property was it. I learned all I could for 7 odd years about property and was heavily invested in it as well. I did my first couple of purchases on my own, which was
Mhm.
still fairly good, but they were all the same type of purchase, all within a couple of kilometers of each other. One was only a couple of streets away. So everything that I wouldn't do now in terms of recommending that for clients, it's just that's what I did. But they still performed okay. But
Mhm.
looking back now, I would have done a lot better if I had engaged the support of a buyer's agent or somebody that knew more than I did, because 7 years ago, none of my family had done it either. So I was just trying to break the pattern. But I also realized a lot of people were making a lot of mistakes. And this will sound a bit cliche, but they were going out, they were buying the off the plan
Mhm.
apartments. They were going out and they were buying properties on massive blocks and all the maintenance and renovations that kind of came with that too. Or they were highly leveraging themselves and getting into properties that they couldn't afford. And obviously, with the recent rate hike cycle, they've had to sell. So I think it was more about really trying to get in there and help the buyers out and help them change their mindset around property buying and investing. Because from a home buyer point of view, it's quite daunting
Mhm.
and it's hard to take action. So being able to help home buyers get into the market, I guess change their lives in some way, get them into a property and really set them up, because if you can get them into the right property as a home buyer, that property is going to grow and then they can do whatever they fucking want. They could refi it, sell it down, upgrade, whatever they want to do. But it's about setting them up right. And from the investor side of stuff, it's really helping investors understand what property can do for them and
Mhm.
how they're going to actually achieve it as well, because it can be quite life changing too if you do it right. But if you get it wrong, it's the opposite. Like, you might have the idea of slowing work down in the next 15 years, going part time, starting a business or whatever it is. But if you get that purchase wrong, you're going to have to offload the property, lose a whole lot of money, or work even harder just to pay off the property or hold the property if you can't sell it because you've purchased the wrong thing. So it can really set you back.
What I wanted to touch on, Pete, was I remember when you and I first connected, I loved your business name, Mindset Property. Can you clarify what was the reasoning behind that?
It's funny. It was the easiest business decision I've ever made. It was just so weird. I was like, what am I going to call it? Oh, yeah, Mindset Property, done. That was it. There was no fucking around with the name. I think I learned at a really young age that in order to achieve anything, you need to have the right mindset. So I used to be a swimmer, 10 times a week training and all that kind of stuff. Wouldn't have been able to achieve what I did without the right mindset, which then translated into school, uni, building a portfolio, and then business. And I think you got to treat property the same now. It's so hard to buy and get into the market, and it's so hard to think differently as well. Like rent investing, for example, that's a completely different mindset. So yeah, that's where it came from really, was trying to shift people's mindsets towards what property can do for them and the fact that they can actually get in, because I do believe everyone can own property, and that could be a little controversial, But I think if you have the right strategy behind it, you can own property. You can save and you can own it. It may take 10 years and you may have to invest outside of your own state. And you can do purchases for as little as $300,000 these days. But if you really want to get on the property market, you can. You just got to have the right mindset around that, the right strategy. And I guess without the right mindset, you're not going to be able to tackle all the issues that are going to come your way.
I love that. I think everything of what we're doing with this podcast is helping people with their mindset around property, because it can be amazing or it can be not. If you don't have the right mindset.
It can be extremely daunting and frustrating.
Yeah, then people don't make the decision to go ahead with it, which again is life-changing, because you sit out of the market for 2, 3, 4 years and the market's just moved so much. Now you got no chance of buying in your own state or wherever you want to live. So yeah, if you don't have the right mindset, you're not going to take action, which can be detrimental down the track.
In terms of that analysis paralysis, Pete, do you think first home buyers in particular overthink it?
Yeah, 100%. They want everything often. They have this idea in their head around what they want for their first home, and prices have moved a lot, and that's just not achievable for 90% of people. So yes, I think they do overthink it. As little as just paint. There might be a house we walk through and it has red walls or something like that because it's all dated. That stuff can be fixed.
They'll screw their noses up if it's minor cosmetics. They want everything done for them.
Yeah, that's it. Or it just might need a new kitchen or an updated bathroom or something like that. But it ticks like 9 out of 10 boxes. First home buyers, I find, are very reluctant to even consider a property like that. Whether I have to change their mindset around, well, actually, this is why you're in the position you are, looking for 12 months before you're coming to me. You keep saying no to these types of properties when really, let's say the market has moved 70, 80 grand in 12 months. It was only going to be a 5, 10 grand fix. So you've actually cost yourself 60 grand or whatever the numbers are. So yeah, it's really, I do find home buyers do get quite wrapped up in the small things, which is what my job is, to try and bring them up a little bit and see it from a different point of view.
Yeah, for sure. There's no perfect property. And once you kind of let go of that idea of a perfect property or the dream house, a dream home, different, right? Home is what you make it. I think a lot of people can get attached to the idea of the dream house, and then they end up overlooking amazing opportunities that they could make it a dream home or they could make it a great investment for themselves. But it's, like you touched on, it's the red wall, it's a weird kitchen appliance, it's something that really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And then they end up missing the opportunity to snap it up. I don't think I've ever chatted to a client who's been looking for 12 months who goes, oh, I'm really glad I've been looking for 12 months.
Yeah. How much time do you get back when you stop looking?
Yes, the weekends, the dealing with agents.
Deal with yourself when you're not looking at home every weekend.
Yeah. Or you just engage Pete and Pete does it all for you and you don't have to worry about it.
How good.
That's the goal. And it's, you have to like constantly, we go back to the mindset thing again. It's realigning your mindset constantly in the property space because it moves so quickly.
It does.
So what you could afford a couple of months ago is a different story to today. So right, what are we going to compromise on? Because there's no such thing as the perfect property. And one of my first questions to clients, mainly the home buyer clients, not so the investors, is what's your perfect property? And then the next question is, right, what are we willing to compromise on? Because if you want to buy in this suburb with this specs of the property, this is what you're going to get. So it's about working out what's compromisable and
is it hard to keep a straight face sometimes?
Sometimes, a lot of the time, yeah. Especially those that people don't seem to learn their lesson in a way. It's they still have the same mindset from 12 months ago and expect to be able to find the property just because they're engaging a buyer's agent, which could happen. But the reality is their mindset's not right. They haven't got their expectations in check. And yeah, sometimes it's hard not to sneak a smile or just cover my face, something like that. But yeah, but you got to bring everyone back, and it's easier said than done just to talk about it. You got to really take people through it. And sometimes it's really, it can become a bit like counseling. And I've said that on a podcast before where you got 2 home buyers, it becomes a counseling session because they don't realize that one wants one thing and then the other wants something else, and that there's no compromise there between those 2 things, which is fine. They're the not negotiables. So not negotiating on that. That needs to be in there. But what are the negotiables and what are you willing to compromise on? Yeah.
And which one in that partnership is giving up?
Yeah.
Someone has to give up.
They do. And I try and make sure it's as even as possible. And it's hard though, because there's always going to be one more dominant partner in the relationship. Always. It's just how it naturally happens. But when it comes to signing that piece of paper, you want everyone on the same page because it's a mountain of effort to go through the sourcing, go through the inspections, the negotiations, all the emotions involved with that. For one partner to have hesitations throughout that whole process, but not want to say anything and then not sign the dotted line at the end, or sign the dotted line and have resentment towards their partner and to me as well, because they bought the wrong property. Not the wrong property, but the property is not exactly what they wanted, or it doesn't have their non-negotiables in it.
I think non-negotiables is probably a great way to lean us into some rapid fire questions I had aside. What's the dumbest thing you've seen people obsess over at an open?
I've got a pet hate for people who are knocking on the walls when it's clearly brick veneer. Oh, it's so obvious that it's brick veneer, but they're knocking on the walls trying to be professional. I hate that.
What?
Doing? Yeah.
Yeah, like it's going to be any different behind the wall.
Again, what are you knocking for? What are you looking for?
Unless you're a building inspector and you could pick up maybe termite damage or something.
Yeah. But
99% of people got no idea though.
Are they really going to see that termite damage at head height? Like all that stuff's going to be down low, right?
Hey, exactly. Yeah. I don't understand what people do. But yeah, I caught myself doing that too when I was first looking at homes. And I'm like, the double brick home, why am I not? It's just because you see people do it. But yeah, I've got a pet hate for it because I think people do it on purpose to show the agent and everyone else that they know what they're looking for. So like, all be scared of this buyer.
Going to have the wall pulled over their eyes.
It's like when you're shopping for a car and you just look under the hood of it. And it's just like, what the fuck are you looking at? You don't know. You're not a mechanic. You don't know what you're looking for. You're just looking under the hood and you're like, oh yeah, that's an engine.
Well, it's got a steering wheel and 4 wheels. It's good.
Sky, I'm worried if you're looking under the hood of a car and there's a steering wheel.
Well, absolutely. But I absolutely pay a professional when buying a car because I've got no idea.
Exactly. Like
I apply for real estate.
Yeah, like you pay a mechanic to go out and inspect a car that you're going to spend, a used car that you're going to spend 10 grand on, but then you're going to go spend $1 million on a house and you're going to go fucking knock on a wall yourself and be like, oh yeah, that sounds all right.
Right, yeah.
The other thing before we move on to the next, and this is something I do want to get out into the space of property buying, and just to have a little bit of respect inserted into the whole process too, is going through, I guess, the owners or the tenants' drawers. Like I've seen people go through people's drawers and they throw it back, they'll slam the drawers and they'll look in every single cupboard. Look, it's obviously, I understand why people do it, but the functionality of a drawer should not really have an influence on what you're going to pay for the property. So looking in people's drawers is just, I don't understand, or even just...
They sit on the beds. They sit on the couches.
Sit on the beds, yeah, sit on the couches. Kids are running around, yeah.
Yeah. So, Pete, talking about cooked experiences at open homes, what's the most cooked experience you've had with a sales agent?
Yeah, look, there's been a few, but there would be one that kind of comes to mind. So what happened was we were going through the process. We made an offer on the property, back and forth. Agent wasn't happy with the final sale price. We were within the guide as well. It wasn't like we were below the guide. We weren't above the guide. We're at the bottom end of the guide. And just wasn't happy with that. And I turned around and said, it's within the guide, it should be enough. And the demeanor of the agent completely changed and it went to swearing and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden clicked back into gear and we were back to normal. We then did a building and pest inspection and it came back, I wouldn't say super negative, but we tried to negotiate off the purchase price. Again, once I made that phone call, agent just went all happy and then all of a sudden just completely changed, like swearing, saying my buyers don't know what they're doing, all of this kind of stuff. Just the demeanor change was just at the click of a finger. And then again, once we'd vented, got out whatever he wanted to say, it went back to normal. He said, okay, right, I'll talk to the buyers. And then again, it happened again, came back. We said, no, we're not happy. It just the constant change of, I guess,
whiplash.
The way the agent was talking to me. And I don't know whether it was because I was a buyer's agent and he just, I don't know, felt like he could do that. But I hope that he didn't treat buyers like that as well, because at the end of the day, like, I'm going to feed this right back to my buyers as well. Maybe not completely what was said, but just saying how difficult the agent was to deal with. So that would probably be one of the more cooked deals that I've done in the past. We got the deal done in the end, but no one should have to really sit there and take aggressive behavior just because we're working through problems that do need to be fixed. And at the end of the day, both parties got a good deal in the end anyway.
I feel like in that situation, if it was the client dealing with the sales agent directly, the sales agent probably would have torpedoed the whole sale.
Yeah.
They just would have been like, oh, the purchases are being too difficult. Let's go with another offer instead. So even though you copped the abuse, I think that roles reversed and there was no buyer's agent in that whole cycle. I reckon the agent just goes, well, you know what? Fuck you guys. We'll go and deal with another offer instead because you're being a pain.
Put it this way, the buyers were keen to pull. I obviously have to communicate what's being said. Now, I held back a lot of the stuff that was said because I knew that
This was the right property for them.
Yeah, we'd been looking for so long. They'd been looking for so long as well. I wasn't going to let this one go. So I had to cop it on the chin, relay what I had to relay back to the buyers, but they were ready to pull the pin. Like, they were ready to just move on and be like, fuck this deal. We're going to find something else. And I'm like, we're not finding anything else. But yeah, they would have pulled it. And then that would have poorly reflected on them, but also the sellers as well, because they'd been trying to sell the property and they needed to sell the property too because they had their own circumstances. He just wasn't helping either situation, really. He would have completely screwed over his own sellers who needed to sell and just wasn't recognizing that the requests were fair and reasonable. Like I said, the offer was within the guide. And the guy was probably a little bit of a smart ass when he got a bit stuck up about it. I said, well, why'd you put the guide? We were within the guide. And that kind of probably set him off a little bit too. But it was a reasonable question. But his answer was, or her answer, could be either one, was that, well, you know what guides are like. We want more than the guide. You know how it works. You should know. That was the response. And I'm like, well, no, a guide is a guide, right? If you're going to put the guide there, sure, if you've marketed the property right, you might be able to get a higher price, but we're still within it. So it's a fair offer.
Yeah, you could never pay me enough to do your job. Not a chance. But I'm glad that you love it.
And look, most agents are okay. They're okay to deal with. They recognize the value of a buyer's agent and in the transaction as well. It's just a couple that are always going to be the outliers. Same thing in any industry, though. There's always going to be a few.
That's a great point. I wanted to make sure that we fitted this one in before we wrapped up because it's a little bit controversial. What's a popular suburb that is actually a terrible place to buy?
Or across Australia, or
let's do SA.
SA?
Yeah.
Popular suburb, which is actually a terrible place to buy. It's a hard one because it comes down to budget and strategy, all of that. Yeah. So, for example, if we were to look in the far north, in your pockets like around Elizabeth, Davern Parks and all that, buying a unit in that market, not a good idea. You can buy a house for not that much more. Well, these days is a bit harder. It really comes down to market. In those markets, you want to be buying a house on a decent sized land where you've got a lot of uplift in the future. If you're looking at Unley, like we talked about in the last podcast, if you're looking to invest there, buying a house probably doesn't make a lot of sense unless you can sustain a significant amount of negative cash flow. And a unit actually might make more sense because if we're talking from an investment point of view, a lot of tenants can't afford to rent in Unley. They're going to actually be looking for units in that market. So it's a hard question to answer. Do you have like more of a specific budget point or price point or something like that in terms of where it might be terrible? Or
Yeah. Let's say you had 800 grand, right?
Yeah.
And you were going to go out and buy in SA, let's say Adelaide Metro. What's a suburb that initially people would be like, oh yeah, 800 grand gets you a lot in this suburb, but they might end up shooting themselves in the foot?
Yeah, I would think some of the inner city suburbs, let's go Prospect, for example. Now, Prospect's not going to get you a house, but it's going to get you an apartment, but there's a lot of apartments coming to market. So if you're going to go and spend 800 grand just so you can get into a desirable suburb, but you're buying an apartment, that would make it a terrible purchasing decision. Terrible is probably a bit of a harsh word, but in my mind, it's a really bad decision.
So a terrible decision.
Yeah, so a terrible decision. Yeah. And your Bowdens as well in Adelaide, they're just building those apartments constantly at the moment. Just because you've got 800 grand and you want to be in the best suburb, some of the best suburbs across Adelaide as an example, if the only option is to buy an off-the-plan apartment or an apartment which has heaps of other apartments within the building, high strata fees and that, then it's not going to be a good decision. I'd rather take that 800,000 and invest it into a suburb or a local government area that has, you can get a house and it's like 16, 17 Ks out of the city.
And to bring us home strong, because I think you did a great job calling out some fallacies there in terms of the area being the most important thing. If someone's looking for a buyer's agent, what are the top 3 red flags that you would say if they presented themselves, they should probably look at someone else?
Number 1 would be the fee structure. If they sit you down and you're having your initial meeting with them and they say, oh, but you don't have to pay us, our service is free, that's a massive red flag.
And I know that we have unpacked that previously, but we'll dive into it again. So fees, what would the other 2 be?
Whether they purchase for themselves. So especially if it's an investment purchase, understanding what that buyer's agent has done for themselves, because one thing that I really don't like happening in the buyer's agent market at the moment is buyer's agents entering the market and they haven't purchased an investment property themselves, yet they're going out there and recommending investment properties for their clients. You need to go and do it yourself. And there's a reason why I built my own portfolio before I started the buyer's agent business, was because I didn't want to be that buyer's agent who hadn't had a portfolio but was then recommending investment property purchases for clients. It just doesn't make sense. You need to go and do what you're recommending for clients. So you're really trying to find someone who's done what you want to achieve. But if they haven't done that, then again, that's a red flag.
Yeah, perfect. It's like the 21-year-old life coach, right?
Yeah.
It pops up
everywhere.
they pop up on Instagram. They're the best life coach ever, and they're 21 years old and they've hit no adversity in their life ever.
I'm sorry, but you just described 80% of property managers out there. They don't even own property and have not had any life experience, but they're managing people's biggest assets.
That's what happens when you want to pay someone $3.50 for an entry-level job.
But you would have the same in broking too, right? These brokers coming through and they don't even own property themselves. So how are they then advising people on that purchase?
Don't get me wrong, like I've bought, sold, I've had my own property journey. Broking's a little bit different in the sense that there's that loan and relational perspective with the client. So I don't want to say that I'd immediately discount any broker that hasn't bought property before. But what I would say is that if you're looking to work with a broker and build out, let's say, a portfolio of properties, you'd want to work with someone who'd done that before, either for their clients and they can demonstrate that they've done it for their clients, or they've done it personally. Because I think that proof is proof, as simple as that sounds. If they can prove that they've done the thing or helped someone do the thing, then they're pretty good value. If they just talk about it, but they can't actually prove it to you, then you're just like, okay, well, something doesn't stack up here. Pete, what about the 3rd red flag?
This is probably my favorite, and it will uncover a few things within the industry, but there's a particular course out there that teaches you to become a buyer's agent, right? And one of the things that they talk about is how to prospect. And for those that don't know what prospect means, it's basically how you're going to find your next clients. If you're getting approached, and this is happening a lot, if you're getting approached at open homes by buyer's agents, so one strategy is to scope out open homes and basically speak to as many buyers as you can. So it really comes down to, if I take a few steps back, it's how have you met the buyer's agent? If you've met them at an open home where they clearly don't look like they're there for a client, they're not doing any inspection videos or standing there with a client and they're just approaching buyers, that to me is a red flag because they're new to the market.
And they're not out doing any work, so they're desperate for business.
Exactly. It just shows that they're fairly new. Now, some of them might be really good buyer's agents in the future, but they just don't have the runs on the board to back that up. But again, that's what the course teaches you. Is to get out there and open homes, talk to the people who miss out at on auction as well. So you might have a few buyer's agents sitting at the auction, and then they'll target the ones that are the underbidders and go and have a chat with them and exchange cards and all that kind of shit. The other one that I've heard as well, which relates to how you meet the buyer's agent, and this was a surprise, is they're actually approaching real estate agents and asking for access to their database. So they'll make the phone call to the real estate agent and say, hey, can I have access to your database, basically? And anyone that I call up on that database who comes on board, so signs up with me, I'll pay you a referral fee. Now, we talked about referral fees a couple of weeks ago. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you've got a buyer's agent calling you because they've got access to a real estate agent's database, that is just massive desperation, basically. Because again, it's not a good way to generate business, and it comes down to how you've met them. So really think about how you meet them. If they've come from a trusted mortgage broker, or you've seen them on social media, or referral from a friend, that's all fine. But I guess if you've met them at an open home, if you've had a random phone call from them, probably a couple of red flags there where I'd reconsider going further with them.
Mm-hmm. Juicy. Perfect way to put it. On that note, Pete, thank you for giving us a lot of context around what a BA actually does, because I think a lot of people would have gotten tons of value out of this and some really great gems, in particular how to avoid a dud BA and also renegotiating at different stages of the sales process. I think those in themselves can save people tens of thousands of dollars. So thank you for being an open book, and I'll put a plug in us until next week, where we're putting a certain mortgage broker in the hot seat to talk about what they do. Thanks, guys.